Here's your first official look at the new Google Pixel 10. And this comes just a few months after we released ads of all of the Pixel 10 models. This once again shows that there's really no difference in the design of the Pixel 10 over the Pixel 9 from last year. Now, starting off with the colors, we have the Obsidian, Frost, and Limoncello colors. The Limoncello is more of a yellowish, greenish color. It's a very bright color, which is something we don't always see from Google, but we definitely like seeing it from Google because a lot of these other companies like to put out these pretty boring colors, to be quite honest. So this is the base model, and the base model is the one that gets all the fun colors. The indigo is going to be more of a royal blue color. It's going to be a little bit lighter than the blue shadow on the Galaxy Z Fold 7. And then we have Frost, which is going to be a much lighter blue. Think of the light blue from like the iPhone 15 a couple years ago. And then, of course, we have Obsidian, which is Google's black color. Now, the biggest change that we're going to see looking at the Pixel 10 is actually going to be on that camera bar. Camera bar looks to be about the exact same dimensions as it was last year. However, the glass going over the camera is now longer than it was last year. That's because we now have 3 cameras instead of 2. It also looks like the cameras are not quite spaced evenly, and that's likely because of the different sizes that we have this year. The primary camera is now a 48 megapixel sensor. That's down from a 50 megapixel from last year. The sensor size is also smaller, and it's going to be the same across the board on all 3 of these sensors. The ultra wide is also dropping from 48 megapixels last year to 12 megapixels this year. And then the new telephoto is a 10.8 megapixel telephoto, which is going to sound familiar because it comes from the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, while the other 2 come from the Pixel 9a that was released just a few months ago. So these are all smaller sensors than what we've had previously on the Pixel 9 and even the Pixel 8. And while that looks like a downgrade on paper, I wouldn't necessarily say that it is a downgrade. And that comes down to Google's computational photography. Google's computational photography is really, really good on these smaller sensors. There's a reason why the Pixel A series continually wins those blind camera tests every year amongst all these other smartphones that cost 2, 3, 4, 5 times as much as the Pixel A series. And it comes down to Google's computational photography. So while on paper this looks like a large downgrade, especially where the price is supposed to be going up this year, we're going to hold our judgment on these cameras until we get the device in hand to check it out and see how much worse or better it is versus last year's cameras. Now, with Google adding all 3 cameras this year, that does put it in line with Samsung's base model for the Galaxy S lineup, which Samsung's been doing this since, I believe, the S20, having all 3 cameras on the base model at about $799, although the S20 was a couple $100 more right at the start of the pandemic, and then they crashed the prices a little bit with the S21 and continuing up to the S25 this year. On paper, Google's sensors might actually be better than what Samsung has. Google's computational photography is also better than Samsung. Samsung likes to really oversaturate their pictures from their cameras, which some people like. A lot of others want more natural and want it to look more like it looked from the human eye. But this means that Google is finally competing with Samsung. So why is Google messing with these camera sizes this year? These sensor sizes? Because they're not doing this on the Pro models. Well, it's likely to differentiate the Pixel 10 from the Pixel 10 Pro. Now that they all have all 3 cameras, what's differentiating the Pixel 10 from the Pixel 10 Pro, and it's going to be the size of those cameras, as well as some of the material. Now, internally, the Pixel 10 is going to support that new Tensor G5 processor, and it's being manufactured by TSMC on its 3nm process. A lot of people are expecting that this is going to now compete with the Snapdragon 8 Elite and the MediaTek Dimensity 9400. But honestly, that's not going to happen. It's unfortunate, but Google is not focusing on raw performance. So don't expect this chipset to hit over 3,000 on the Geekbench single core benchmark. Instead, Google is focusing more on AI performance and software performance to make their different software tricks work better on the Pixel. Now with that Tensor G5, we're also getting 12 gigabytes of RAM, 128 gigabytes of storage, or 256 gigabytes of storage. Unfortunately, we're not getting a 512 gigabyte or a 1 terabyte model for the base model, which is really unfortunate because I would like to see Google get rid of that 128 gigabyte model across the whole board and just stick to 256 on all the models, especially with how much storage AI is already taking it before the next 6 years of updates. The Pixel 10 is going to have 7 years of updates. Now, powering the Pixel 10 is going to be that 4,900 milliamp hour battery. This is quite a bit larger than last year's Pixel 9. It's actually on par with Samsung's Galaxy S25 Plus, which is a 6.7-inch display versus the Pixel 10 at 6.3 inches. That's impressive and should provide good battery life. especially if it's anything like what we saw on the Pixel 9a with that 5100 milliamp hour battery at 6.3 inches, which did have an older modem, so it wasn't quite the best battery life we could get. But now we're getting that newer, more efficient processor from TSMC on the Tensor G5, along with this bigger battery. Should see some pretty great battery improvements here. The Pixel 10 does have a larger battery than the Pixel 10 Pro, even though the phones are the exact same physical size. The reason for that is actually the vapor chamber. The Pixel 10 Pro, Pro XL, and Fold will all get a vapor chamber this year, but the base model is skipping out on that once again. And since Google has extra space now, it makes sense that they would add in more battery over that vapor chamber. Although I think most of us would rather have that vapor chamber because it should result in better battery life even with smaller battery. Now, Google has already announced that the Pixel 10 series will be announced on August 20th at a small event in New York City. We have already reported on pre-order starting that same day. The event starts at 1 p.m. We expect it to end around 2 p.m. Eastern that day, and pre-order should reopen almost immediately after. Pre-order should start shipping out around August 28th, though we have seen Google stagger the release or the shipping of these devices last year, so we could see that again this year. Last year, we had the Pixel 9 and 9 Pro XL shipped together, but the 9 Pro was about a week after, and then the 9 Pro Fold was almost a month after that. Now, for more details on the Pixel 10 series, make sure to head to AndroidHeadlines.com. We have all kinds of exclusive information coming up and plenty more to come.